I squatted down next to my goat and let an exasperated sigh escape my lips with a little bit too much force. A tear cascaded down to the tip of my nose and made me slightly annoyed that my nose quickly followed that flow. Why were my goats getting sick? Their alfalfa hay was about as beautiful and as green as it could be. They had mineral and baking soda. They always had fresh water. What was I missing? My name is Delcy. I'm the owner of A Life of Heritage and a goat owner for 10 years. And in the next 9 minutes, I'm going to walk you through 3 very key and essential items in raising goats. This is the beginning steps to understanding what your goats will need. After Russell downloaded and began to use my goat health and information binder, he told me this. This information has already changed how I have been handling my goats with food, water, cleaning, everything. That is how key all of this information is for any goat owner. Now, these items are pretty basic. You may have even thought about them yourself. Your goats will need water, feed, and minerals available to them at all times. That seems pretty easy, right? It is, except when it isn't. Let me tell you why. I'm going to begin talking about minerals. Vitamins and minerals are the foundation of any diet. When we as humans don't get our daily intake of them, our health will begin to deteriorate over time. This is very true for goats, but it seems more pronounced and quick acting with them. Minerals are found in the food they eat and the water they drink, and you will need to also make it available to them at all times. It comes in a powder form, and you will need to put it out in a container of some sort. It will also need to be protected from the elements and climbing goats, and will also need to be refilled promptly and often. It is that important. Without essential minerals, your goats will suffer from parasites and worms, lack of luster in their hair coats, breeding issues, pregnancy and delivery problems, and even their kids can be affected by their mother's lack of minerals. They can develop anemia, pneumonia, and deficiencies that will end in disaster. Minerals should be immediately out and available when your goat comes home. As mentioned, minerals are also in the hay you will feed your goats. Some hay will have more of one mineral than another hay. It all depends on your location and soil content. And it is really important to know what your area produces. You can find this information at your local extension office. But when you buy mineral for goats, it must be mineral labeled for goats, not sheep and goats. Sheep cannot have copper or need very minimal amounts of copper. It is toxic to sheep in large amounts, but goats really need copper for optimal health. So the mineral really needs to be specifically formulated for goats, and it needs to be available at all times. In some places, the goats won't eat much of it. They are probably getting what they need in the water and food they are drinking, but in other places, the goats will really eat a lot of it, like mine do. My goats eat a lot of minerals. So the first thing you need is mineral, always, no questions asked. Minerals are that important. It is also very beneficial to the goats to add a container filled with baking soda. They will eat it when they need it, and it will help their rumen maintain a healthy pH balance. It will also help them not get bloat. Just know that it can be added to their diet and is an inexpensive way to keep them healthy. But before you bring your goats home, you also need to have a food source ready and available. And that depends on the area you live in. Some areas are warmer, and if there is enough land and pasture rotation, the goats can graze a majority of their diet. But if you live up north, like I do, then you will need to supplement their diet with hay for a majority of the year. If your goats are grazing pastures, remember how important it is to not overgraze your property. If possible, rotate through different areas on your property. As the grass gets shorter, the goats have more chance of getting worms. This is one very important factor to consider. Goats do not handle quick changes to their diet well at all. All changes need to be done gradually and with intention. If it is in the spring and you're going to from dry hay to lush pasture grass, do this change gradually. Let them out for 10 minutes the first day and increase their time out each day for the next week. Their poop will probably loosen a little bit, but you won't have a horrible bout of sickness to deal with when you change over gradually. All grain needs to be locked up, and if you are changing grains, change them over slowly. Their rumens really need time to adjust to any changes made to their diet. If you are in an area where you will need to be buying and storing hay, you will need to consider several things. Number one, you should utilize a hay calculator to know how much hay you will need for the winter months. I will link that calculator below for your convenience. If you're putting up your own hay or are purchasing hay, you will need to buy hay that is free from mold and that has been baled up at optimal times. All of that will change the nutritional value of your hay. And as we just discussed, nutrition is so very important. Number two, when storing your hay, you will need to keep it in a dry place. That would be either in a covered barn or covered tightly with tarps to keep out the rain and the snow. Number three, it is always best to have enough hay to last the season that you will need it for. There is nothing more frustrating or alarming than running out and not being able to find any, or having to pay a lot more for each bale. If you own breeding animals, you will probably need to supplement their diet with some grain so their body is given the energy and nutrients to maintain a healthy breeding and kidding season. So now you know you will need to always have minerals available and have pasture and probably stored hay for the winter months. But what was I missing? My goats were getting mineral, baking soda, and good quality hay. They should have been healthy. Why weren't they? I struggled with this question and asked Google, talked to my vet and goat friends, and finally landed on an answer. After I realized what was going on, I had a duh moment. I felt like I should have seen it sooner, but sometimes we get so focused in, we forget to see the big picture. What was the problem? My water source. Our well water leaves a ring of red on all our sinks and bathtub, high in iron, and it smells like rotten eggs, too much sulfur. What's the big deal about iron and sulfur? Well, those two minerals will bind copper. And remember how important copper is for goats? Yeah, it can be a pretty bad deal when they aren't getting enough, especially when the water they drink is causing even more problems. The last bit of information we need to talk about is your water source. You need to know if your water is higher in some minerals that actually hinder and bind your goat's performance. And if it is, you will need to either change your water source or supplement with copper boluses or selenium or whatever it is that your goat may be short on. You can also add a few things to your water that can benefit a goat's health as well. You can add in a splash of apple cider vinegar. Apple cider vinegar is good for anything and everyone. Goats, chickens, you and me. Apple cider vinegar for the win. If you live in an area like where I live, you will need to add a heat source to your water. Goats like warmer water. They will drink it better in the winter when it's not ice cold. And you will keep your sanity when you don't have to open up a frozen tank every day. Ask me how I know. If your goats don't have an open water source in the winter, or even in the hot summer months, if they run out of water, it can be disastrous. Rumen animals drink a lot of water, and a lot more water than animals that don't chew their cud. They need water to help them to digest their food. And if that digestion gets off in any way, you will have a sick goat. If you've forgotten to fill your water and came out to it dry and the goat's begging for water, you have a high chance in the next couple of days to find a goat or two not feeling well and will need to help them through that. As you are preparing for your goats, you will need to think about mineral, feed, and water. Although that may sound obvious, there is more to think about with each of those than you may have first thought about. I wish you all the best as you plan out where you will get your hay and in finding your mineral source. I'll see you tomorrow when we talk about the general supplies that you will need on hand for your goats. Now that I figured out the mystery of my goats and property, they are healthier and happier, and I don't have tears dripping down to the tip of my nose anymore. Which is nice because all that moisture is just such a nuisance, especially when it's below freezing.